one of the things I've noticed, I'll give you an example. So in my industry, I do business with a number of Muslims and Jews, right? The industry I'm in, cell phones primarily, it's very, it's like most of the people who came into the industry, it's a young industry, weren't super well educated, right? So you have a lot of Indians, you have Muslims, you have Jews, for the most part, within the business, and grew up working with them. And it was interesting to see how a lot of the Muslim people I've worked with were very, very specific about not taking interest. And just in their lives, they were very regimented about this. That it says in the Quran or in the Torah, whichever they're pulling it from, that interest is not allowed. And they're very, very, very specific on it, to the point that they often won't even take interest on a mortgage, on a home loan. And in Judaism, there are some allowances for it in the form of business. Heter iska and things like that. But like what I've seen in my world, and many, many, many examples of
not
this,
exactly like
just completely disregarded how interest is. It's not even a worry or a concern or a consideration, you know. And I've gone into it in different examples. There was one case where someone asked me for a loan, and in order to give the loan, it was for a personal matter. In order to give the loan, I was borrowing money against an asset of mine. So it's a relatively low interest way of borrowing. You can borrow against, sometimes real estate or stocks or things like that. It's an easier way to borrow. So I had to borrow in order to loan. And I called the rabbi and I said, am I allowed to just pass through my costs? Right? Like I have small costs on the loan. Can I pass it through to the person I'm loaning the money? And he told me I can't. I can't. He's like, as part of the cost of the loan, you'll have to incur the costs for the loan. And if there's no business transaction on the other side. So it gave me a sensitivity to, and obviously I'm not saying halacha, right? Someone should talk to their rabbi about this.
Kind of goes back to what you were saying of submitting to someone beyond yourself, so the ego doesn't kind of get involved and actually not let you be conscious. And in a way, like to a rabbi, I'm saying like to us to actually really...
Yeah, and another person may call their rabbi, and the rabbi will give them a different answer. I recognize that there could be different opinions on the same thing, and it's important to have an individual relationship with an individual rabbi who understands you, your situation, the halacha, and positions it accordingly. So I'm far from sharing halacha on the subject at all. But what I'm saying is that the questions in this domain are plenty, and they're very serious. And I've seen the damage, I've seen the ramifications of it. Oftentimes we think halachas are arbitrary, or rules in the Torah are arbitrary. But interest is a very, very, very dangerous concept. It is. It creates a lot of problems. There's someone who said the only way he's seen people, like wealthy people, lose their money are the 3 L's: liquid, ladies, and leverage. Wow. So too much alcohol, too many women, or borrowing too much money.
A little bit like kiss or kas, or that statement.
Yes,
that was similar.
Right, it's kind of similar. So leverage is a very it's very dangerous, and unsecured debt is very dangerous, and credit card debt is a huge...
It's like when you're in it, you realize the wisdom of the Torah in terms of having certain parameters that kind of protect.
Yes.
Yeah, you get to see it with the first, direct.
Yes, I've concluded that when there's 2 people engaged in a high interest loan, both people are insane on the conversation. Both people are actually insane on the conversation. The person calling is not thinking about the future and actually what this costs. Warren Buffett has a line. He says, the 8th wonder of the world is compound interest.
Wow.
Those who understand it earn it, and those who don't pay it. And in compound interest, it's...
Wow, what a line.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. If you took out a calculator, just if anyone... Go
appreciate
online,
the scale.
Yeah, go online and put in investment return. Just an investment return calculator. And what it would take to take $10,000 at 10% a year for... just $10,000, put 10% a year for a number of times. And then instead of 10%, put 12%, then put 14, then put 16 and 18. And you think,
exponential.
Wow, it's just called exponential. You're building exponential. The numbers that'll come out on the page in front of your eyes are unbelievable. Like a good example of this is doubling a penny. Would you rather $10,000 or doubling a penny every day for 30 days?
Wow.
And I think the answer, if you double a penny every day for 30
It's
days,
like,
something like $2.5 million. I mean, it's not normal the speed at which this happens. So on the one hand, the person who's borrowing at high interest, unsecured, doesn't fully understand the scale of the trap he's walking into. And the person who's giving it is saying like, wow, for so little effort, I can get such a return. Why wouldn't I engage in this?
It's messed up on both sides.
Yeah, it's messed up on both sides. Yeah, and that's why with interest, it's on both. The sin is on both sides of the equation, which means it's not like the sin, the wrong, as a way to punish us.
As a transaction that lacks
meaning it creates a problem in both people's world. It creates a problem in both people's worlds.
As a relational interaction is actually creating. Wow.
Yeah, and seeing some of the things I've seen in business, which I don't know that most people get access to.
Right.
To this.
That's what I was kind of sensing, is like you've got such direct line
visibility.
Of sight.
Yes.
Yeah, of what happens in these kinds of...
Yeah, in the amongst high net worth individuals, the ease of borrowing money at high interest, it's a phone call.
Wow.
Hey, can I borrow $1 million? I'll pay you 2% a month, or something like that. Like, it's
somewhere along the line, people are getting exploited.
It's both on both sides, and to me, it's I don't know. That's why I wanted to speak to this rabbi. I thought to have this level of conversation where it's.
Is he an expert in kind of like ethics on that side?
That's what he said. He said, I don't feel so comfortable. He's like, I'm a rabbinical expert. I don't feel so comfortable diving into the experts of interest. And I said, I don't know that we need to. I'm not looking to break down all the halachas. I'm looking at it in the
broader.
I'm looking in the reverse, meaning I backed into the halachas around, let's say, promiscuity and sexuality from real world experience of the problems of it. I thought at first when I was reading these laws as a teenager, that someone was punishing me and saying, here, I like chocolate, and you tell me not to have chocolate. So let's make my life difficult. It's kafia. Like there's some sort of benefit in fasting and renting. And maybe there is, but what I've learned in the real world is that sexuality is an all-consuming obsession, and if we go too far with that, our lives get taken over. There's no more toys in the sandbox. Nothing else is interesting other than the next orgasm, and it's very, very, very dangerous. And so, meaning arriving at that and then looking back in the original text and saying, "Oh wow, there was such wisdom here."
Right, in the focusing of that energy. I mean, the Rebbe gives the metaphor of like, to people who feel that the Torah is so restrictive or the Jewish way of life is like it's just focused energy. If you take a laser which can cut diamonds, it's just like lights, but focused in such a level that it has such a power. And it's like the parameters of, in some ways, it's like. For me, it's important to also appreciate the other side of how the structures are there to create growth and life. They're not there in and of themselves, but to create true healthy life. But to appreciate as well that's without that discipline and without that the parameters in a certain way, it's just like there's just so much risk and so much can go wrong and does go wrong.
Right.
When it's such a powerful force that you're talking about.
Right. And I would say I've arrived at a similar conclusion based on certain things I've seen around the ills of interest, right? How certain people a number of years ago, someone I knew got into like a mountain of problems. An old friend of mine, and when I sat down to review his numbers with him and through it, I was like, how did you do this? Like, how did you accomplish to dig something? Like, it seemed like you were only working with a shovel. How did you dig 1,000 feet? Like, how did you get this mountain on your head? And as I understood more and more, he was dealing in an arena with high interest. So when he called someone, he was insane, like I said, and the other person was insane, and they engaged in this transaction that had a recipe for a disaster. Meaning, we're engaging in something unsustainable. If you think about someone committing adultery, right? They're temporarily insane.
Right.
Right.
There's no way it can end good.
Yeah, there's no way this can go. And you're talking about the ramifications for this, for a moment, for a few moments of pleasure, like your kids, their kids, like the impact of this event is huge, right? You're engaging in an unsustainable relationship.
It's like in recovery work, I often say to someone who I'm working with, I say, in addiction, we all think we're going to be the one who's going to just get it right. It's like, you don't have examples of, very few, if there are, of addicts who've really been able to sustain that. It's like, but yet, when you're in it, it's like,
right,
I can do this, I can manage this. It's just like,
and one of the things in step 2 that we talk about, right, is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, right? And such an important word that all of us who engage in the healing path, especially through the 12 steps, have to reckon with, is that we were insane. That's why it's suggesting to us that there's something that can restore us to sanity.
Right.
And I would argue the same, that someone who's engaging in, let's say, an adulterous relationship, they are insane in the sense that this is unsustainable. Something is going to, there's a bomb that's going to explode today, in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40, something is going to, something's going to explode. And the same is true when two people are engaging in an unsecured high interest transaction. There's an unsustainable quality to it. The best someone can say is that someone else is going to end up holding the bag.
Right.
Like, I'll get repaid, but someone else will deal with the full consequences of this. So, and what is high interest and what is low interest, right? So I'm not even... Right. Unsecured debt is a very, very dangerous game to play with, which is why the reason for that...
so fascinating that parallel of sexual energy and money and financial, how to creative energy. We were speaking a little bit about it over the last few days, and just how they go hand in hand often.
The money energy and the sexual energy, and watching this, and then thinking about the teaching of Rav Nachman's student, which is how we got here, is that there's an opportunity to practice halacha when that phone call comes in. I'll give you an example. Is based on this sensitivity, which I didn't always have, but for whatever reason, I didn't get dragged into the world. More to do with my temperament than anything else. So I didn't get dragged into that world. I'm like a more conservative business guy, so in some ways afraid of my own shadow. So it was more, slowly growing in that way and not wanting to take too many risks. But seeing others, many others who've gotten caught up in this on both sides, and then thinking about this teaching, is there's an opportunity to bring that sensitivity into the business world. So a friend of mine, after I understood it's better, this particular friend who I mentioned, when he called for a high interest loan, there was no question I wasn't going to do it. For me, the alarm bells went off. He's in trouble. No one is calling for a high interest loan unless they're in trouble. Really, so I said I'd be happy to meet with you to discuss it. And when we sat down, I said, "Is everything okay?" And it didn't take long for him to break down crying, and we went into the numbers and things like that. And it was so out of whack. He had dug a 1,000-foot hole with, you would think a shovel, but he wasn't operating with shovel. He was operating with sticks of dynamite, high interest, debt, or just interest. Interest is a rule. And then I think in going into this, and I guess at this point in time, having gone on this riff, it's probably not necessary to bring a rabbi onto the podcast. I just think that it's important that as Jews, we're sensitive about the values that we talk about.
Sure. And really live those, integrate.
Live those, yeah. And like, what does it mean? Why does it talk about interest as such a dangerous idea?
Get into it and really actually, be aware.
And then how many people have taken a loan to pay a tzedakah debt? And if you took that loan to pay a tzedakah debt because the reputation was attached to it or something else, which I've seen on more than one occasion, was there interest attached to that? And then what's good and what's bad, and who are you attaching to this? Yeah, wow. Like we have to really look at and understand these things. And again, I'm coming at it the way I come to from everything else. I'm coming to it from the real world damage of it, and then afterwards seeing it in the book and saying, "Wow, I go out the great wisdom that existed in the Torah when it spoke about the ills of interest." It has such harsh language around it. I believe the word for interest is very connected to snake.
Yes,
right, and the snake is the great evil in the Torah. And there are many. I think Rashi has very strong language around interest. And for whatever reason, there was a business allowance that was made, but it's very, 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 very narrow. Snake is also
connected with sexual energy too. Interesting. Snake is also connected with sexual energy as well. The snake.
In what way?
In different contexts, like with Chava, Adam and Chava, there's certain commentaries around that and just what it represents in terms of that impulse and drive, just as an energy. It's interesting because the Kundalini which is also the flow of energy in our, embodied
It's a
spheres.
serpentine energy.
It's a serpentine, yeah. It's not flowing in the linear, it's flowing from the base chakra to the crown in an actual figure of eight, DNA-like in some ways, interestingly, serpentine way, yeah. So when we get that flow right and channel that energy in the right way, then the Nachash becomes Mashiach, because it's the same gematria, actually. It's exactly the same gematria, Nachash and Mashiach. And there's fascinating Kabbalistic teachings by the Alter Rebbe, actually, in a fascinating discourse of his around the episode of the snake biting the Jewish people, and the very strange, bizarre Hashem telling Moshe to raise a serpent on the pole, which would be the source of healing, and that became the symbol of the medical Caduceus, I think it's called, and just the Kabbalistic aspects around that, and the source of it is actually really all from Hashem, the negativity, the death, the ego aspects, and to work with that and appreciate that and transform that.
Right.
Yeah. Such an opportunity, as you say, but beautiful how you came to these, the appreciation of the wisdom of the Torah through your direct experience. It's a beautiful way to come to that. There's a
and I hope more people go on to talk about it and discuss it, because for whatever reason we become very lax in the culture about it. And the parallel, what I've seen, like I said, with people I do business with in the Muslim community who are so particular. And I recognize that there aren't allowances within their religion that exist within Judaism. But there's no question to me that we've taken a small allowance and blown it so far beyond what the original intent was, that we're back to where we started.
Such an interesting thing to know, something I had no concept about. In terms
I don't think that most people understand the. It's. I think it's one of the underbellies that are existing, one of the undercurrents that are existing, and
not being addressed by the leadership or just.
I don't know that many people are that aware of it. I don't know that many people are that aware of it, but I can tell you it's systemic.
Wow.
It's 100% systemic. And then again, going back to teaching of Rav Nachman, where the opportunity, and this is not to judge anyone or shame anyone. Like I said with myself, I was spared entry into it only by my temperament, not by the knowledge of the danger or anything else. I very easily could have got sucked very deep.
Quite amazing how that's unfolded in that way.
Into that world. And then, later on, sitting with investment advisors and then showing me this calculator that I mentioned Warren Buffett talks about, compound interest and what it can do. And it's mind-blowing